We have to talk about a contradiction today. I mean, it's a tension that sits right at the heart of Western history, and honestly, if you just look at the headlines, it's screaming for attention.
It really is. It's one of those topics where the ancient world and the modern world just crash right into each other.
So here's the setup. You have Christianity. It's a religion founded by Jesus, a man who was, explicitly, radically nonviolent. He said, love your enemies, turn the other cheek, and do not resist an evildoer. I mean, that is the DNA of the faith.
Right. And for the first few centuries, I mean, the early Christians took that literally. You couldn't be a soldier and a Christian.
Yeah.
They saw them as just incompatible.
But then you look at history and you look at today and you see that this same religion developed this massive, rigorous intellectual framework, just war theory, that explains not only if you can kill people, but how to do it ethically. To an outsider or, even to a skeptic, that looks a lot like hypocrisy. It looks like the church finding a loophole to play power politics.
It absolutely can look like that. It sounds like they're trying to square a circle.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how that happened. How do we get from the Sermon on the Mount to a checklist for warfare?
Yeah.
We're going to trace the origins with St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas. But, and this is the part I'm really interested in, we're going to take those medieval rules written for knights and swords and crash test them against modern nightmares.
That is the real challenge. I mean, does a theory from the 13th century hold up when the sword is a drone strike controlled from a shipping container in Nevada?
Yes.
Or when the threat is a terrorist with a dirty bomb?
That is the question. We have a stack of sources here, theological journals, historical texts like The City of God, modern ethical analyses of drone warfare. So let's go back to the breaking point, because this didn't start in a vacuum. It started with a crisis.
It started with the end of the world, or at least it felt like it. We're talking 410 AD.
Set the scene for us.
You have to understand the psychology of the time. Rome wasn't just a city. It was civilization itself, the eternal city. It was supposed to last forever. And then the Visigoths, barbarians from the north, smashed through the gates and sacked it.
This is a 9/11 level event, but times 1,000.
Exactly. The order of the world just collapsed overnight. And immediately, the blame game started. The pagans, the Romans who still worshiped the old gods like Mars and Jupiter, they turned on the Christians.
Why the Christians?
They said, look, when we worshiped the gods of war, Rome was invincible. But now we've abandoned them for this Christian God who tells us to be meek, to be humble, to turn the other cheek.
And look what happened.
You made the empire soft. You opened the gates to the barbarians.
That's a devastating political attack. They were basically accusing Christianity of destroying national security.
Precisely. And this is where St. Augustine steps in. He's the intellectual heavyweight of the time. And he realizes he can't just let that slide. So he writes The City of God to defend the faith. But he has this massive philosophical problem to solve.
Right.
He has to reconcile the command to love your neighbor with the reality that if you don't fight back, the barbarians are going to burn your house down and kill your family.
So how does he do it? I mean, how do you justify killing as an act of love? Because that sounds like Orwellian doublespeak to me.
It does sound like that to modern ears. But Augustine performs this really interesting pivot. He argues that our definition of peace is too shallow. We tend to think peace is just the absence of conflict. If no one's fighting, there's peace. Augustine says no. True peace is the tranquility of order.
The tranquility of order. Okay, unpack that.
If a gang of bandits is slaughtering a village and you stand there watching with your hands in your pockets because you're peaceful, Augustine says you aren't being peaceful. You are actually complicit in the disorder. You're allowing chaos to reign.
So passive inaction can be a sin.
Yes. He argues that inaction in the face of grave evil is not a virtue, it's cowardice. And this leads to his aha moment about war. He uses the analogy of a father and a son.
Okay.
If a son's doing something wicked, let's say he's attacking someone or destroying himself with vice, and the father physically restrains him or even punishes him, does the father hate the son?
No. Ideally, he's disciplining him to correct him.
Right. Augustine calls this benevolent severity.
Yeah.
He argues that war, if it's just, is not about hatred. It's an act of charity. You're fighting to save the innocent neighbor from attack, yes. But, and this is the wild part, you're also fighting to stop the aggressor from doing evil.
You're saving the bad guy from himself.
In a theological sense, yes. By stopping him, you are preventing him from piling up more sin and damning himself further. You're correcting a sinner.
Okay, I hear the logic, but I have to push back. That sounds incredibly dangerous. I am invading you for your own good. I'm bombing you to save your soul. Any tyrant in history could use that logic to justify an atrocity.
You're absolutely right, and Augustine knew that. He knew that benevolent severity could easily become a mask for cruelty. That's why he emphasized the internal disposition.
The difference between the hand and the heart.
Exactly. Augustine argues that Jesus' command to turn the other cheek, it refers to the disposition of the heart. You cannot have personal hatred. You can't have bloodlust. You cannot enjoy the violence. Your body might be wielding a sword to protect the innocent, but your heart should be mourning the necessity of it.
Mournful necessity. Wow, that is a heavy phrase.
It is the core of his view. A Christian soldier kills with sadness, not with joy.
Okay, so Augustine gives us the philosophical permission slip. He explains the why, but it's still a bit vague. It's about feelings and dispositions. Fight with a sad heart. That doesn't really help a general decide whether to launch a campaign.
No, it doesn't.
So fast forward about 800 years. We get to the 13th century. St. Thomas Aquinas enters the picture. And from what I gathered in the reading, he is not a vibes guy. He is a systems guy.
Aquinas is the architect. He takes Augustine's philosophical musings and builds a rigorous legal structure around them in the Summa Theologiae. He creates the checklist.
The checklist.
He says essentially, I don't care how sad you feel about it. If you don't meet these 3 conditions, it's not a war. It's murder.
All right, let's run down the checklist. This is the jus ad bellum, the right to go to war. Condition number 1.
Legitimate authority. This is crucial. War cannot be declared by private citizens or vigilantes.
So if I get a bunch of my friends together and we decide to go fight a drug cartel because the police won't do it, that is not a just war.
No, that's sedition. That's vigilantism.
Right.
Aquinas argues that the sword belongs only to the sovereign, the person or government who has the responsibility for the common weal, the common good.
Right.
Only the one who is responsible for the whole community has the right to use lethal force to protect it.
It's about accountability.
Right. Private violence leads to anarchy. Public violence, properly authorized, restores order.
Okay. Condition number 2.
Just cause. And Aquinas is very restrictive here. You can't go to war to expand your empire. You can't go to war because you want your neighbor's gold or their coastline.
So wars of conquest are automatically sinful.
Automatically. A just cause is punitive. It's reactive. It means the enemy has done something wrong. They've attacked you. They've seized property unjustly. Or they are harming innocents. The war is a specific response to correct that specific wrong.
It's like a massive police action. You broke the law, so now force is used to fix it.
Exactly. It's not about winning. It's about restoration.
And the third one.
Right intention. And this brings us right back to Augustine. Even if you have the king's permission and even if you have a just cause, you can still fail the moral test if your motive is wrong.
What counts as a wrong motive?
Aquinas lists them. The passion for inflicting harm, the cruel thirst for vengeance, an unpacific and relentless spirit, the lust for power.
Wait, hold on. This is where I would get stuck with this theory. We're talking about human beings here. You are asking a soldier to charge into battle, see his friends get killed, try to kill the people shooting at him, but not have a cruel thirst for vengeance, not to have a relentless spirit. That feels psychologically impossible.
It is an immense burden.
Yeah.
It's asking the soldier to be a peacemaking warrior. The idea is that you're an instrument of justice, cutting out a cancer. You don't hate the cancer, you just know it has to go.
Yeah.
But you are right in the heat of combat. Maintaining that spiritual detachment is incredibly difficult.
It feels like a standard set by monks for people who live in mud and blood.
It is a high bar. But the alternative is total war, where anything goes. Aquinas is trying to put a leash on the dog of war.
So we have this medieval framework, authority, cause, intention, designed for a world of knights, sieges, and arrows. Now, I want to do what we promised. I want to drag this 13th century checklist into the 21st century because the arrow has changed.
It certainly has.
Let's start with drones, because this is the defining technology of our era. And on the surface, if you look at the sources, drones seem like they might actually fit the just war model better than old weapons.
That is the argument some ethicists make. There's a principle called discrimination, which was added later, meaning you must distinguish between combatants and civilians. And drones are incredibly precise.
Right.
A Hellfire missile can take out a specific car or even a specific room in a house. Augustine might have preferred that to a medieval siege that starved an entire city to death.
Right, seems cleaner. But the sources highlight a massive ethical snag.
Several snags. The first is about the nature of the warrior. Just war theory traditionally assumes a mutual risk. The soldier puts his body on the line to protect the state. There's a sacrifice.
And with a drone pilot?
There is zero physical risk. He's sitting in a trailer in Nevada. He might be drinking a coffee. He kills a target in Yemen. His shift ends, and he goes home to have dinner with his kids.
It gamifies the war.
That is the fear. It creates a moral hazard. If war becomes too safe, too cheap, and too easy for us, does it lower the threshold for violence?
Yeah.
Do we stop looking for diplomatic solutions because it's just so easy to send a drone?
It bypasses the last resort principle because the cost is so low?
Exactly. And then there's the legitimate authority problem. This is a fascinating point in the literature. Who are we fighting with drones usually?
Terrorists. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, insurgent groups.
Right. But those aren't sovereign states. They don't have a king or a president in the traditional sense.
Okay.
So under strict Aquinas rules, is this a war? Or is it an assassination campaign?
That's a blurry line. If they aren't a state, can we legally be at war with them?
Well, some scholars argue that terrorists are hostis humani generis, enemies of all mankind, like pirates. So the state has a police duty to hunt them down.
Okay.
But others argue that by bypassing national borders to strike individuals, we are dismantling the very concept of sovereignty and order that Augustine wanted to protect. We're creating a world where borders don't matter if you have a drone list.
And speaking of ignoring borders, let's talk about preemptive strikes. This feels like the biggest friction point between the ancient theory and modern reality.
It is. Remember, Aquinas said just war is punitive, it's reactive. You hit me, so I hit you back to restore justice. It generally forbids preventive war attacking someone because you think they might hurt you in the future.
But that rule was written before nuclear weapons, before biological agents.
Precisely. If the first hit is a nuclear bomb in a suitcase in Times Square, you don't get a chance to launch a just war to restore the status quo. The game is over. The damage is total.
So does the theory crumble here, or do we update it?
Well, you have modern thinkers like George Weigel and Robert P. George mentioned in the sources. They argue that the theory needs to be stretched. They argue that in a world of WMDs and rogue states, the definition of imminent threat has to change. They argue that if a terrorist group or a rogue regime possesses a WMD, that is an imminent aggression, even if they haven't launched it yet. Therefore, striking them first isn't preventive in the old, illegal sense. It is a necessary act of defense.
They're saying waiting is suicide.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
They argue that waiting for the mushroom cloud is a dereliction of duty by the government.
But not everyone buys that, right? The sources mention the U.S. bishops being very skeptical.
Very skeptical. Traditionalists warn that this logic gives everyone a blank check. If you allow preemptive war based on what might happen, then any country can invade any other country and say, well, we thought they were a threat.
It becomes the Minority Report problem. You're punishing a crime before it has happened.
Exactly. It risks turning war from a tool of justice into a tool of policy and aggression. It violates the just cause condition because the cause hasn't happened yet.
And since we brought up WMDs, we have to talk about the ultimate weapon, nuclear weapons.
This is where the theory just hits a wall.
Does just war theory allow for a nuclear deterrence?
It barely tolerates deterrence, and it absolutely forbids use. Pope Pius XII and almost all modern ethicists agree. Just war requires proportionality and discrimination. You must spare non-combatants.
And a nuke doesn't discriminate.
A nuke kills the soldier, the baby, the nursing home, the hospital, and the dog. It destroys the environment for generations. It is total negation. There's no way to squeeze a nuclear strike into the just war box.
So, if a Christian soldier is sitting in a silo and gets the order to launch?
According to the theory, he would have to refuse.
Why?
He cannot participate in the slaughter of innocents, even if his own country has been hit.
That leads us perfectly to the final piece of this puzzle, the human element, the soldier.
Yes.
Because we can sit here and talk about Aquinas and Augustine and policy papers, but ultimately, war is a 19-year-old with a rifle or a pilot with a joystick.
Right.
What does this framework say about their soul?
Augustine was deeply worried about this. He knew that killing changes a person. He came up with the idea that the soldier is an instrument, like a sword in the hand of the king.
This is the theological root of the I was just following orders defense.
It is. Augustine tried to comfort the soldier. He said if a king orders a wicked war, the king bears the guilt. The soldier, by obeying the order to fight, is innocent of murder. He's doing his civic duty.
But come on, we have to be honest. That defense doesn't fly anymore. Not after Nuremberg, not after Vietnam.
No, it doesn't. Modern international law and modern moral theology rejects the idea that you can shut off your conscience just because you're in uniform. You are still a moral agent.
But Augustine was getting at something else too, wasn't he? It wasn't just about legal guilt.
It was about moral injury. Augustine believed the real evil in war wasn't death. We all die eventually. The real evil is the corruption of the soul, the love of violence.
The cruelty.
Becoming a monster. Exactly. The just war theory isn't just a checklist for the president to feel good about his foreign policy. It's a shield for the soldier's humanity. It sets boundaries. I can shoot this combatant, but I cannot shoot this prisoner. So that when the guns go silent, the soldier can go home and still recognize himself in the mirror.
It's about preserving the human inside the hell of war.
Yes. And that's why just war theory sits in this uncomfortable middle ground. On one side, you have absolute pacifism, which says never fight. But the sources argue that could be a failure of love if you let the innocent be slaughtered because you want to keep your own hands clean.
And on the other side, you have realism. War is hell. Do whatever it takes to win.
And just war stands in the breach and says, no, even in hell, there are rules. Even in the chaos, we are accountable to something higher.
It's a brake, not a gas pedal.
Perfectly put.
I want to leave the listener with a thought that kept coming up in the reading for me, and frankly, it's a disturbing one. We talked about Augustine's idea of benevolent severity, that we fight for the enemy's good to stop them from doing evil. It requires an internal disposition of love.
Right. You must not hate the person you're fighting.
But here's the question. In the age of remote warfare, where the enemy is a pixel, a heat signature on a screen, or a data set, is it even possible to maintain that internal disposition? Can you love a heat signature?
That is the haunting question.
Or does the distance make the right intention impossible because it erases the humanity of the enemy entirely? If we don't see their face, do we just treat them like bugs in a system to be deleted?
If we do that, we've lost the very moral grounding that Augustine was trying to build. We become technicians of death, not peacemaking warriors.
Something to think about next time you see a headline about a drone strike. That's our deep dive for today. Thanks for listening.